I thought that migrations would all kind of have the same pattern. We would help folks, especially who are doing the same migration, and we would be able to say like, well, we're the migration experts. We can help you upgrade from React 17 to 18 like we have 15 people before. That didn't really happen, did it?
No, not really. I mean, it definitely reminds you of the what's that line from Anna Karenina? Happy families are all alike. Unhappy families are all unhappy in their own unique way. And I think we do really see that with migrations, just because they end up being uniquely difficult. And you're right. It definitely seems a little counterintuitive, because it's like, hey, you're upgrading from Vue 2 to 3. They're upgrading from Vue 2 to 3. Like, you basically run the same playbook.
You would think, okay, but what happens?
It maybe doesn't seem intuitive at first, but if you go kind of like one level down, I think it does make a lot of sense. A lot of these, first of all, are libraries with a significant surface area or some size. So it's expected that like some people are going to use one part of the library and other companies are going to use different parts. And so they're going to have to focus on different parts of the upgrade. One example that I was thinking of about this was I worked on a Rails upgrade many years ago, but still quite sharp in my mind. It was an upgrade from Rails 2 to 3. And we had hooked into Active Record, the Rails ORM, in this kind of unholy way to accomplish something interesting. In that jump from 2 to 3, we had just a bear of a time making that change in a way that other people doing the Rails 2 to 3 upgrade did not, because Active Record and AREL and like a couple other things changed. And so we had to do a lot more different work that other people didn't have to do in that upgrade. And it's in part about like, well, what parts of the library you're using. You're going to have to adjust to different changes. And that's just the thing itself. So if you're going from, version 2 to 3, you're going to be using some stuff. Other people are going to be using other stuff. The applications are shaped differently. You're going to have to make different types of changes.
It makes sense. This was a Twitter, right?
Yeah, that's right. We had a couple of Rails monoliths, and this was one of them.
Tell me a little bit more about that. Active Record is a pretty core part of Rails. Why was Twitter using it in a different way that made that upgrade particularly hard?
I'm trying to remember the specifics of it, but it was largely like, people are just writing code to get something done. And so somebody had an idea for like how we would hook into the DB layer in a way that Active Record didn't expose in its public API. And so we were like, okay, we're just going to write the code to do this thing. You're playing with fire when you do this, whenever you touch these internal APIs, right? Because right. Like it worked. It did the thing we wanted and we were happy until this moment came. And then all of a sudden the debt came due and we were like, oh shoot, like there's no migration path because nobody wanted us to do this. No one expected us to do this. And we just happened to do it, in order to do something. I think it was to subscribe to some type of change in the database. But the main point was that we were doing something that worked, but you weren't really supposed to do. And so there was no like paved path for us to continue doing it in the future. And it took somebody, like weeks to unravel and figure out basically how to do it from scratch.
Yeah, absolutely. You figured this is a story from a decade ago, and that was Twitter's migration. We've all learned our lessons. But no, I talked to somebody 2 weeks ago who decided they were going to integrate a GraphQL API with a Python ORM, and they're going to hook into the internals of it. And now they're stuck 3 versions behind. So right. Yeah, of course.
That's pretty common. And then, so that's one aspect of it, which is that like these libraries are relatively large. People are using them in different ways. But on top of that, often the challenging upgrades happen in like a larger ecosystem. If you think of whether it's Rails or Django or any of these larger frameworks, people rarely use them just that library off the shelf. Usually they're using it with an ecosystem of plugins that are part of their upgrade story. So in going from, Django bumping a version or going from React 17 to 18, you are presumably using a lot of things that hook into that library. And you need to figure out how the things that you're using are going to be upgraded along with everything else. And it's unlikely that your fingerprint of all of those dependencies and the plugins you're using are exactly like somebody else's.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, there's a migration guide to get from Rails 2 to 3 to 4 to whatever version it is now. And there's a guide to get from React 17 to 18, but there's not a guide to get from React 17 to 18 if you're using these 15 different libraries, because you're probably the only company in the world doing that.
Right. And each of those plugins is going to have its own story. Like, did they think about, is this person or is this platform going to use my plugin to get from here to there? Maybe there's a team of people developing, and maybe it's just a solo person who's doing it as a side project, and you've taken a dependency on that. And so like figuring out how you're going to get not just from Rails 7 to 14 or whatever the current version is, but like how all of your plugins are going to go along with it adds a lot of complexity that's unique to different companies.